Hey everybody, I am doing a video post for maybe the first time. I don't know if I've really ever done this before, but I just had some things to share with you about equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. And I thought, hey, let me talk through a few things to share with you some of the things that we're learning about these areas. And hopefully they can be things that you can take forward for yourself and learn as well if you do anything related to learning in your career or in your work. First, I want to start with some of the learning that myself and my team did last year in 2024, especially around accessibility and inclusion related learning. And I'll maybe try to teach you a couple things about those elements along the way. I was just asked today in a social media post if we had a comprehensive guide for all of the things that we think about in terms of accessibility and inclusion. And we really don't have one place, unfortunately. Someday, maybe there'll be a resource that I can create around that. But for now, watching our blog, watching our social media channels on LinkedIn, or I'm still on Instagram for the time being. But LinkedIn probably is the best place. Me personally, Beth Kugler Blom, or BCB Learning on LinkedIn, and the podcast as well, Facilitating on Purpose. We often talk about inclusion and accessibility related issues on the podcast with my many guests from all over the place. So, those are some great things. If you don't follow us on these places already, follow us now because this is what we often talk about because it's so much a part of our work. I am doing this video post in part because I'm seeing a lot of terrible stuff, frankly, happening in the United States right now. This is the week of January. Well, today it's January 29th, 2025. And I just want to let folks know that in Canada, in my country, we are doing a lot. A lot of us are doing a lot, and we are not backing off issues and actions and practices having to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Okay, so let's talk about this. This feels like a solo podcast episode, but doing it by video. You can kind of imagine me creating solo podcast episodes when I do this. Last year, we did some learning around accessibility and inclusive design. And one of the things was one of my team members went and did some courses in plain language with Editors Canada. And we've been really doing a lot of learning, myself included, in terms of plain language, because we bring this into every project now that we have and use it when creating our style sheets to guide, particularly our learning design projects. We're trying to figure out what plain language means to the particular learner group that we have. This is inclusion, right? Plain language is not just one standard, it's a standard and elements, I guess, that we should think about, particularly for the group that we have at hand. And so when you work with us, we have these extensive things that we go through around who the learners are and things like what does plain language mean to them. So plain language absolutely is something that you should be paying attention to now and figuring out what plain language means for your learner group or the people that you're serving. We also attended a webinar on the BC accessibility standards that are here, but also being drafted, and they're out for kind of review right now. It's going to take years to be able to put some real solid teeth to the accessibility standards in British Columbia. But the tack we're taking in my company is that we are trying to learn as much as we can about accessibility things that we can do now. And we are teaching our clients about that. And we will be ready for when the teeth come to the accessibility legislation. Our clients will be ready for that. And hopefully they will even exceed what will be in the legislation. So we're not going to wait 10 years till everything is, out there and kind of you have to adhere to something. We are starting that work now, and we have been doing this for really the last 2 or 3 or more years, as well as we've been learning along this way ourselves. One good guest that I had on my podcast this year was Suzanne Wertheim. She wrote a book called The Inclusive Language Field Guide. If you're really interested in inclusive language that is including everyone and making people feel welcome and feel like they belong. That's a great podcast episode to listen to with Suzanne. She was a dynamic guest, and I really recommend the book, The Inclusive Language Field Guide. Now, last year, we also did some learning in facilitation and engagement techniques. As always, we attended some Liberating Structures user group meetings, and Liberating Structures always, there's a bent there around inclusion and accessibility. There's a lot of us talking about how to be innovative with liberating structures and take inclusion in mind or keep it in mind. So the LS user group meetings, I'm always going to some of those throughout the year in various spaces, and those are great places to connect if you want to keep learning about facilitation methods and talk about some of those pieces as well around inclusion and innovation. We also attended a Priya Parker webinar, How to Dream Up a Gathering You Actually Want to Host, focusing on impactful and community-driven gatherings. People, if you don't know Priya Parker yet, you really have to get on this bandwagon because she wrote a great book called The Art of Gathering several years ago now. And I know many of us still watch what she does in terms of the facilitation that she's teaching about. So yeah, check out Priya Parker for facilitation in general, but she's often, I believe, talking about inclusion related pieces as well. We also went to a trauma-informed pedagogy session through MyFest. These are the folks out of Egypt at the American University in Cairo. That was just a short session, but again, another aspect of inclusion, being trauma-informed in our design and our facilitation work. So this one was around developing strategies for creating safe and inclusive learning environments. We also completed a webinar on emotion and immersion in storytelling. So we want to know more about storytelling because it helps us create more immersive learning experiences, particularly on the e-learning side. Is that inclusive? I'm pretty sure it is because there's all sorts of storytelling aspects where we can draw in characters and situations and scenarios. And it's really important when we do that to make sure that we are including relevant and meaningful examples for everyone, not just a particular group of people. So we might talk about storytelling, but we're also talking about DEIA aspects as well, and weaving those into our storytelling work when we create any kind of a learning experience, actually. By the way, this piece is all in a blog post that we wrote. It's called our 2024 Professional Development Highlights. So I'm just kind of reading down through the bulleted list in the blog post and just telling you a little bit more as I go along. But you can always go check out this blog post if you're not quite sure what I've mentioned and where you can go find that thing yourself. We posted this on December 18th, 2024, if you're curious. Last few things here, we did some learning around cultural awareness and ethics, kind of as a broad category. Within that, one of the things that one of my team members did is do the Flow micro course from BC Campus called Ethics of AI Images in the Classroom. And so this was all around the responsible use of artificial intelligence in education and keeping that in mind when we choose images for our courses. We also took the Home on Native Land course to deepen understanding of our place and our cultural context. I've just started going through, this is actually a team member of mine who did the whole course. I've started the Home on Native Land course as well, and I'm finding it very excellent as well to learn about our Indigenous history here in Canada. And it helps us with our culturally responsive learning design to be able to keep grounding ourselves in Indigenous history and knowledge that can help us in so many different ways. So Indigenous related learning is always important to us. And every year we're kind of trying to pay attention on Indigenous perspectives and approaches and ways of knowing and being where we can learn something to expand our practice in so many different ways. Last thing is that I started taking some courses through Simon Fraser University in editing. And so as a learning designer, there's tons of editing that I do, just reading other people's work and editing my own work. And Carla on our team is our editor who comes in to edit all our documents that will be printed or online documents or courses. So editing is a big part of our learning design role. And I don't know if you'd be surprised to hear this, but the field of editing, there's all sorts of inclusion pieces being talked about within the field of editing as well, because of course, editors have to pick up in the language that they see written, um, things that transgress inclusion or diversity aspects. So while it's fantastic to have me go through these editing certificate courses, just I want to recognize and acknowledge that there are diversity, equity, and inclusion pieces within those as well, even though on the face of it, it's just about editing. Okay, so that gives you a sense of some of the things that we did last year to increase our own learning in our field and our work of learning design and facilitation. I'm sure we didn't capture all the things that we did on more of a micro level. These were just some of the things that we wrote down and remembered to write down throughout the year. But I wanted to share this with you because we have so much expertise in our field. And we are always learning about something related to the field. And a lot of that these days has to do with equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. There is so much to learn, so much to be aware of, people to talk to, experts to talk to and learn from, people with lived experience that share things with us that we don't know and we will never know because we have no lived experience with those people. One of the things that I'm trying to do and did last year that I guess I should mention is that on every project, I really am trying to make space and time and budget to ask people to review courses that we're working on or come in and consult with us on some aspect of our work that is related to DEIA initiatives. Okay, so last year I had a blind consultant look at a couple of things that we did, a couple of courses, and review that from their perspective and give me feedback on that. I also hired an user experience design expert last year. It's something that I think all of us really should be adding into all of our project budgets to make sure that we're not just relying on our own experience, but we can actually learn from and give money to consultants in the field who have lived experience in different ways. This could be Indigenous people. This could be marginalized folks, maybe folks with mental health and addictions. If you're creating a course, that would be for people in that category, people with physical or cognitive disabilities. The list goes on and on about the learning that we can do in the aspect of DEIA, just in terms of learning design. But of course, in terms of just walking around in the world as well. Again, I want to say I don't like what's going on in the States right now. I know a lot of you who live there don't like it either. And I want to just, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I don't want to do a post like this so that you think, oh, Beth and her team are so great. You should give me kudos. Don't give me kudos for this. I'm just simply saying this is important to me and this is important to my company. We don't really need to be recognized for this. Really, please still keep recognizing people of color and people with all of those lived experience aspects that I was just talking about. Give the kudos there, give the money to them, and keep pushing and keep doing the actions around this. Don't roll back like we're seeing happen in the States right now. I'm not rolling it back. I'm going to keep moving it forward. And I really encourage all of you to do it as well. If you have any feedback on this post, I would love to hear from you. Please reach out and let's keep learning together as we all should do. Thank you so much for listening. All right, bye-bye.